Alright, so to get to the kaiju diffs, what I did was, we'll start with center diff. You have these two larger screws right here you got to take out. Then these two that actually go through to the wheelie bar in the back. So just those two. So those four there. Then if you flip it over, you got these two, these two, these two, these two, and these two. Those will take that whole plate off. That takes off everything, so you can actually see your rear diff, your center diff. Now when you take the four off in the front, that's going to separate basically the whole rear end, shock tower and all. So this whole section is going to separate. And so when you're getting to your center diff, under here, you're going to have a bearing plate that you'll have to take off, two small button screws too, and two longer button screws that go on the actual diff like cover, I guess you could say, the center diff cover. So you'll take those two out. They're under this, and then once this separates a little, you can wiggle it back a little, and then once you wiggle it back a little, you'll be able to slip your center diff out. Leave everything like it is, just kind of wiggle it out of there. You'll have splines that you'll have to take off this side and then wiggle it out, and that'll be, and then of course you'll turn your diff over and you'll take the four screws out, fill it up with oil, put them back together. Just make sure you take it apart exactly like you put it back together, same thing. Now once you're done with this one, you can put your bearing cover back on with those button screws, put your diff cover back on with those two screws, then go ahead and put you can go ahead and flip the car back over at that point. Leave your cover off the bottom, because you can go ahead and put these two screws in right here, this one and this one, to hold this back on, because you don't need it separated anymore once you get it slid back together. But leave this one down here and this one down here out, because to get to the rear diff, I found it easiest. Those actually go through to this wheelie bar. So for the rear diff, you're going to take this one and this one right here. Sorry, kind of hard to see in the camera view. This one and that one. So both those two there out, which also go through to the wheelie bar on this side. So just leave those two out. Then once your wheelie bar is out, of course I've got the sway bar on mine, so I had to take these two little screws that hold the sway bar in. But you may not have the sway bar, so if not, then you're good there. So this back plate will be off. There's going to be a screw in here, but this plate will be gone. A screw in there and a screw in the center. So you'll take those three out. Once those three are out, this plate will get loose. Just make sure you watch how it comes off, because it goes back on the same way. Obviously, it's got that little dip in it. So you can see in mine, if you need it for reference, that's the way it's shaped. And then once you've got those out, your wheelie bar will come off. Or actually, it won't come off all the way because you got these two. You can drop it down, the whole thing. Oh yeah, it does. Never mind. Messed that up. It does come off with those four screws. So your wheelie bar will be detached. And I just kind of hung mine over the top here. And then this diff cover here has got that little button screw there and that little button screw there. Once you get those out, this will wiggle, this will come out. Now, because your rear end will be somewhat loose, I didn't have to take anything else apart. I could take the diff. Once it's loose, these dog bones will actually slip out enough that you can just wiggle the diff out. Now, the main gear goes on this side. So if you're looking at the rear of the car, your main gear will go back in on the right-hand side, not on the left. Okay, so just make sure you pay attention to how those come out too. So that's it, and then you just put them all back. So once you've got that all done, and you've got your cover back on, your little screws in there, wheelie bar, your little plastic cover, then you can flip it back over and you can put this whole thing back on. All these covers can go back on. Make sure you take a video yourself, because some of these screws are longer than others, and they may be the same size, but they might not be. But some of these smaller ones are actually longer and some are shorter. So take your own video while you're doing it, or label them so you know where they go out, because once you take 18 screws out, you're not going to remember exactly where each one goes. But just remember, these are not any of the button screws. So all these screws on the bottom case here are all going to be these flat that fit in there. They're all flat. And just remember, your larger ones obviously won't fit in the smaller holes, but there are some of the smaller ones that are longer and shorter. So anyways, once that's all done, you're put back together. Same with taking your diffs apart. Once you get your diff out, there's 4 screws that hold the gear on, and then that gear just comes right apart. And then you can put your fluid in and then just screw them back together. Just make sure you, like I said, we watch how everything comes apart. Don't take the gears. Don't take the gears out of the actual diff to fill it with fluid. It's best to try and clean them while they stay in there, because there are little shims that are in certain spots, not all the way around, inside those diff, which are like basically small washers almost. So yeah, because if you accidentally, if a washer comes out, the shim comes out of your differential while you're doing it, you don't want to forget where that goes back in, because it's shimmed obviously for a reason. So I didn't take my actual little gears out of my differential when I took it apart. When I cracked it open, I just cleaned it all out with some brake parts cleaner and all that to get all the old grease and shit out basically, and then just squirted my new diff fluid in there. So it doesn't have to be extravagant. You honestly don't have to clean like every speck of old grease out of there. It's obviously not going to hurt it to put grease in with a little bit of other grease. It's not going to hurt it any. It didn't hurt mine any. I've been running it for a while now. Front one. So same, take this off. There are a button screw here, button screw here. And there's also one down here, right here, or what is it? Right there, yep, right there. And then on one on this side right here. These two have a nut that go in the bottom. There's actually, we'll actually see the nut right there.
Josh, I really need your help.
Okay, sorry about that. So there is, like I said, there's a nut there. Past my finger, you can see. That nut might fall out. Some do, some don't. Mine did. So just remember that's where the nut goes. And those are fairly long screws right there. They're probably at least 1/2 inch long, so those are long ones. Anyway, same with the sway bar. I had to have the sway bar on the front too, so I had to take loose those. Once this is loose, once you get this out, then you have this little front plate that you'll take off. I think you already had yours off, which is 4 screws right there. That takes those off, minus the 2 nuts that are going to be attached to the front there. And then you have 2 bolts, a button screw there, and a button screw there. And like I said, that'll take off your whole front there, and then you'll do the same thing. Once you do that, you'll have this diff cure cover. We'll do the same thing. Once you got these 3 screws, once you got that plate off, you got these 3 screws, 1, 2, 3, same as the back, and that'll separate that little plate right there, exactly the same on the back, goes the same direction, and then you'll be able to pop your diff cover off. And then same thing, your dog bones will just be wiggly and you can slide your whole diff out. You don't have to take I didn't have to take any of my A-arms apart, any of my drive links, nothing like that. I didn't have to pop any of those loose. And then same thing, just put it all back together, put your cover or your diff cover on, your button screws all back in there, the same way, same direction you took it apart. Take a video yourself, so if you need to reference any screws that you may have messed up, that are longer, shorter, whatever, you can get those all done right. But that's pretty basically it, straightforward. Once you've got it all apart, and then you fill it all up, put it back together the same way you took it apart. All right, good luck, man.